In the world built on deception, where the powerful hide their claws behind a smile and the weak are crushed by their own innocence, you have only two choices: become the wolf or remain the prey forever. This video gives you something few people dare to say outright. Kindness is not enough to keep you alive. Honesty is not enough to earn you respect. And morality alone will never bring you what you desire. Machiavelli, the sharpest mind of the Renaissance, will teach you to see the world as it truly is, not as you wish it to be. Today, you will learn how to step into life with your eyes wide open, with the intellect of a fox and the courage of a lion. You will understand how to win when your opponents play dirty, how to remain unshaken when chaos surrounds you, and, most importantly, how to become someone who cannot be controlled. If you are ready to shatter illusions, face reality, and evolve into the strongest version of yourself, then watch until the end. Because this is not just Machiavelli's story. This is your story. Number 1. Machiavelli, the original villain. In humanity's collective memory, the name Niccolò Machiavelli rises like an endless shadow, a figure opposed to every moral standard, a philosophical villain whose very name evokes scheming, ruthlessness, and cold calculation. But any screenwriter who has ever dug deep into the world's greatest antagonists understands a simple truth: no one is pure evil. Every villain carries a story, a philosophy, a disappointment with the world. And Machiavelli, more than anyone, is no exception. He emerged from an age of turmoil, where morality was nothing more than a thin coat of paint over blood-soaked struggles for power. Yet it was the collision between two worlds, idealism and reality, that forged the man and his ideas. Across centuries, Machiavelli has been cast as the wolf among sheep, the one who teaches humanity how to deceive, betray, and manipulate to obtain power. But like any villain with depth, he did not come to spread darkness. Machiavelli simply saw the world exactly as it was. Instead of sugarcoating truth or clinging to moral illusions, he chose to rip away the curtain and reveal the machinery behind power. In an era when Christianity was the spiritual foundation and greatness was measured by kindness and selflessness, Machiavelli appeared like thunder out of season. He did not deny goodness. He merely insisted that goodness alone cannot guarantee survival. For him, a nation's fate was not determined by the purity of its leader, but by the leader's ability to gain power, keep power, and bend morality when necessary. It was this brutally straightforward honesty that turned Machiavelli into an eternal villain. People hated him not because he was wrong, but because he was unbearably right, voicing truths everyone knew, yet no one dared to admit. Statements like, "It is better to be feared than loved," or "A ruler must know how to lie," cemented his reputation as a symbol of immorality. And yet, when you peel away that mask, a different truth emerges. Machiavelli did not encourage cruelty. He described a world where cruelty already existed. He did not promote deceit. He pointed out that deceit is the weapon your enemies will use first. He did not glorify evil. He treated it as an inseparable part of human nature. In this first part, Machiavelli is not the villain. He is the mirror reflecting the cold truth of power. Number 2. A childhood in the realm of chaos. To understand Machiavelli, you must return to 15th century Florence, a city-state as magnificent as a living museum, yet rotting from within like a beautiful body plagued by an incurable disease. This was not the poetic Florence of paintings and verse. This was the Florence of schemes, of violence, of political calculations woven into every breath of daily life. In 1460, Niccolò Machiavelli entered the world with a cry, born into a family of name, but without remaining power. His father, Bernardo, was an intelligent but poor lawyer, a disillusioned intellectual whose faith in religion had begun to crack. His mother, by contrast, was deeply devout, spending her time composing hymns and poems in praise of God. Machiavelli grew up between these two opposing poles, skepticism on one side, devotion on the other. Perhaps it was this inner tug-of-war that planted the seed of his lifelong question: what is the truth? That question would follow him to the end of his days. Florence at the time was a republic in name only, a thin coat of democracy, sure, masking the power machinery of the Medici family. Leaders were chosen every 2 months by lottery, an idea that sounded democratic, but was in reality a game rigged to the finest detail by the Medici. From a young age, Machiavelli witnessed how law was merely the tool of the powerful. And not long after, he saw something even more terrifying: the price one paid for resisting power. When Machiavelli was 9, a group plotting against the Medici was arrested. They were not given a closed trial. There was no fairness. They were hung upside down on the city walls, their bodies exposed for the public to see, left there for weeks until they rotted. That sight was not just a political lesson. It was a brutal rite of passage. It taught Machiavelli that, in the real world, the line between idealism and death was as thin as a strand of hair. And that was only the surface. Beyond Florence, Italy was carved into countless city-states, each with ambitions, each with enemies. Mercenaries changed sides like changing clothes. Today's ally became tomorrow's enemy. Every political decision resembled a high-stakes gamble in which the loser was punished immediately, by the sword or by the noose. From this soil, chaotic, violent, deceitful, and stable, Machiavelli was raised. Not through books alone, but through the harsh reality of daily life. And it was here that his cold, pragmatic, unflinching worldview began to form. Number 3, a meteoric rise, a free fall into ruin. When Machiavelli reached adulthood, Florence once again shifted in the balance of power. In 1494, the Medici were thrown off their political throne after decades of manipulating the Republic. In this vacuum, Machiavelli, then only in his early 20s, suddenly emerged like a figure stepping out from the shadows. No one knows how, with what talent, or through which connections he rose, but he was appointed to an important office in the new government. History leaves behind a mysterious gap here, and that mystery only makes Machiavelli an even more dramatic character. Within only a few years, he rose again. At age 28, Machiavelli held 2 powerful positions: Secretary of the Second Chancery, one of Florence's most crucial institutions, and then Secretary of the Council of 10, responsible for war and diplomacy. In less than a decade, this once unknown young man had become the diplomatic soul of the entire city-state. But this was no peaceful ascent into the sky. Florence in Machiavelli's era was like a raft drifting atop the raging sea of the Italian wars. Surrounding it were France, Spain, the papacy, each one vying for influence. Inside were factional rivalries, constant government changes, and unpredictable surges of political fever. No matter how capable he was, Machiavelli was merely steering a decaying ship in a storm no one could control. He carried out dozens of diplomatic missions, meeting the King of France, observing Cesare Borgia, negotiating with military leaders and Italian rulers. But Florence was too weak. No strong army, no reliable allies, no deterrence. Machiavelli's missions could hardly achieve personal glory, and so later historians labeled him a failed statesman. Yet if you look at the context, he resembles a skilled captain thrown onto a ship whose hull had been cracked long before he ever touched the wheel. Then came disaster. In 1512, the Medici returned with the support of Spanish troops. And with cruel irony, the very family Machiavelli once worked to support became the one to punish him. They accused him of conspiracy, imprisoned him, tortured him, and expelled him from Florence. A rise as swift as a shooting star and a fall just as fast. But it was precisely this downfall that opened the door to the most transformative chapter of his life. The moment he wrote The Prince, the book that would make him immortal. Number 4. The Prince, the book that teaches leaders they cannot afford to be gentle. Exile did not kill Machiavelli. It merely stripped him of his political stage. What remained was a mind burning with the fury of being forgotten. After enduring torture, losing his position, and being cast out of Florence, Machiavelli lived in a small house in the countryside of Sant'Andrea. By day, he farmed and spoke with peasants. By night, he changed his clothes, sat before a candle, opened the classics, and conversed with ancient Rome, as if holding cabinet meetings with Alexander, Julius Caesar, Livy, or Tacitus. And in those silent nights, Machiavelli wrote The Prince. The book was not an academic philosophical treatise, nor the confession of a fallen traitor. It was a survival manual for the jungle of power, a cold, practical guide that did not hide the brutality of politics. Machiavelli wrote it with one clear purpose: to offer it to Lorenzo de' Medici, the very man who had destroyed his career, in hopes of being restored to office. The irony was sharp. To re-enter politics, Machiavelli wrote a book that could make any leader terrified to hire him. But at that point, he no longer cared. He wanted to prove that he understood power better than anyone in Florence. In The Prince, Machiavelli did something no one before him had dared to do. He separated morality entirely from politics. Before him, it was believed that a good leader must be morally good. The ideal ruler was the embodiment of virtue. But Machiavelli looked around at war, revolt, corruption, and the weakness of Florence, and reached a stark conclusion. Being a good person is the fastest way to lose power. He did not write like a philosopher preaching ideals. He wrote like a surgeon dissecting the body of power, exposing every wound, every mechanism beneath the skin. His prose was not ornate. It was sharp as a blade, precise and merciless, like an executioner's sword. Machiavelli declared, "A leader cannot afford to be merciful at all times, cannot afford to be honest at all times, cannot afford to always keep promises, cannot afford to place morality above the survival of the state." He did not deny the value of goodness. He simply said, morality is a luxury. Use it when possible. Abandon it when necessary. Thus, The Prince is not a celebration of evil. It is a warning. Power does not tolerate innocence. And within these pages, Machiavelli redefined the entire rulebook of politics, a definition still terrifyingly accurate after 500 years. Number 5. Cesare Borgia, the perfect leader in Machiavelli's eyes. If The Prince was Machiavelli's compass, then Cesare Borgia was its living embodiment. No one in that era impressed Machiavelli more, and no one terrified the world more. Cesare was the son of Pope Alexander VI, and in one of history's paradoxes, the Prince of the Church became the most ruthless figure in Italian politics. Machiavelli observed Borgia closely during his diplomatic missions. He did not see mercy, quaintness or the moral varnish leaders often try to display. What he saw was effectiveness, so effective it chilled the spine. The story of Ramiro de Lorca is the perfect example. When Borgia seized the city of Cesena, he gave Ramiro full authority with a single command: do whatever is necessary to restore order. Ramiro knew exactly what whatever meant. He beheaded dissenters, seized property, tortured publicly, spreading fear into every household. Within months, Cesena became obedient like a lamb tamed with blood. But Machiavelli saw the deeper layer. Once Cesena was stable, Borgia understood that it was not enough for the people to hate Ramiro. They had to believe that this brutal man was his enemy, not his instrument. So one morning, the citizens awoke to find Ramiro cut in half, his head mounted on a spike in the town square. A message as clear as daylight. Cesare Borgia protects the people from the monster he himself unleashed. Machiavelli did not praise this act for its cruelty. He praised it for its calculation and control. Borgia knew when to be the lion, pure force, and when to be the fox, subtle deception. He created fear, then personally destroyed it to win loyalty. To Machiavelli, this was the ideal leader, willing to use violence but never ruled by it. Willing to lie, but never losing sight of the objective. Willing to sacrifice anyone, but never his own power. What made Borgia compelling was not his brutality, but his ability to make decisions in an environment where simple morality could not survive. Florence was chaotic, Italy fragmented, allies treacherous. Only a man who could wield both sword and strategy could endure. And Machiavelli, with the eyes of a cold analyst, recognized that Borgia did more than endure. He thrived. Borgia became the man Machiavelli believed. If fortune had not betrayed him, he would have united all of Italy. Number 6. Love or fear? The question that decides a leader's fate. If there is one question that has shaken political thought for over 500 years, it is the question Machiavelli poses in The Prince. Should a leader be loved or feared? In his era, an age of churches, philosophers, and moral sermons, the default answer was always loved. An ideal leader was someone the people admired, respected, and willingly followed. But Machiavelli, with his trademark bluntness that irritated moralists everywhere, stepped forward and said, "It is ideal to have both. But if you must choose, choose fear." And that statement was like a blade stabbing straight into the heart of idealistic philosophy. But Machiavelli did not say it for shock value. He said it because he observed real human beings, not humans in moral textbooks, but humans driven by selfishness, fear, ambition, and betrayal. To Machiavelli, love is fragile. It is beautiful, but weak. It shifts with emotions, with political weather, with the slightest rumor. People may love you today and abandon you tomorrow over something trivial. Fear, on the other hand, is stable. Fear is not based on emotion, it is based on consequence. No one likes punishment, and Machiavelli knew that made fear far more durable than any promise of affection. But Machiavelli did not encourage tyranny. He drew a clear line, one that many readers of The Prince completely ignore. A leader may make people fear him, but must never make them hate him. Why? Because hatred breeds plots. Hatred is a fire that never dies, and in the shadows, it creates men eager to wield the knife against you. A leader may rule through fear, but if he crosses the line into hatred, he will collapse under the weight of the resentment he created. Machiavelli wrote, "If you must punish, do it quickly, cleanly, discreetly. If you grant favors, grant them slowly, so people always remember them. Never seize property or dishonor the people, for these are the two things they will die to protect. In an era when politics was wrapped in lofty ideals, Machiavelli was the first to say openly what everyone secretly knew but refused to admit. A leader's reputation is not built on what he is, but on what he appears to be. Love or fear, these are merely tools. The ultimate goal is maintaining power and stability. Machiavelli does not idealize leaders. He teaches them how to survive. Number 7, necessary deception and the art of playing the good person. In The Prince, Machiavelli does not only analyze power, he dissects the concept of image, the invisible weapon sharper than any sword. And here, he delivers one of his most shocking insights. A leader does not need to be virtuous. He only needs to appear virtuous. In Machiavelli's time, moral image was a cloak of legitimacy. But instead of urging leaders to truly live by these virtues, Machiavelli said what no one else dared utter aloud. Morality is a performance, and you must perform it well. He openly acknowledged that honesty, kindness, loyalty, generosity, all are admirable, but only when circumstances allow. When reality forces a choice between virtue and the survival of the state, the answer must be clear. Virtue can wait. Power cannot. Machiavelli wrote that promises, oaths, and commitments, even those sworn upon honor or the divine, may be broken when interests shift. A leader must not become a prisoner of his own words. Others will deceive you, betray you, buy loyalty behind your back. So why hold honesty as an absolute sacred rule? But Machiavelli never encouraged leaders to expose their cruelty. On the contrary, he considered the preservation of a moral image essential for survival. He wrote, "Most people see only what you appear to be, not what you truly are. Men judge with their eyes, not with their hearts." This is one of the coldest observations about human nature. People believe what they see, not the complex truth behind the curtains of power. A leader may be ruthless when necessary, but must show the face of compassion. He may deceive, but must speak with the voice of someone trustworthy. He may betray, but he must tell the story as if he were forced to do it for the greater good. In other words, Machiavelli teaches leaders two skills: act like a fox, speak like a saint. Not to encourage empty fakery, but to reveal a brutal truth. The world does not reward goodness, but it always rewards a beautiful story. Image is soft power. Deception is a tool. Results are the final truth. In Machiavelli's eyes, a leader is not merely a decision maker. He is the master of illusions, the director of the political stage. Number 8, Virtù and Fortuna, the eternal struggle between will and fate. If Machiavelli had stopped at tactics and political pragmatism, he would have been forgotten long ago. But it is his philosophy of Virtù and Fortuna that made him one of the sharpest minds in human history. This is no longer about ruling techniques. This is Machiavelli's explanation of life itself. In his eyes, human beings exist between two forces: fortuna, luck, chaos, the unpredictable currents of the world. Virtù, the inner strength of a person, talent, willpower, boldness, the ability to act and adapt. Fortuna is the flood. Virtù is the levee. Machiavelli said Fortuna determines half of our destiny. The other half is what we can shape, control. Virtus. No one is powerful enough to control everything, but no one is so helpless that they must surrender completely to fate. He gives a vivid image, a violent river overflows, destroys houses, kills villagers. That is Fortuna. But if the people build levees, create channels, reinforce the banks before the flood comes, they can survive. That is Virtù. Fortuna destroys only where people are unprepared. Where Virtù stands, Fortuna loses its power. This philosophy sets Machiavelli apart from the thinkers of his time, who believed God or fate held absolute control. Machiavelli, on the contrary, declared, "No one will save you except yourself. No one will protect you except the strength you forge." Virtù is not morality. Virtù is the capacity to act. It is the boldness to change the course of events. It is the cold strategic mind that adapts when circumstances shift. In Machiavelli's world, the passive are drowned by Fortuna. The rigid are shattered. The adaptable survive. The decisive, and those who seize the moment, win. He wrote that some leaders succeed brilliantly in one era, then fail miserably in the next, even though they continue doing everything that once brought them glory. Because Fortuna changed. And they did not change with it. This is the brutal truth. Those who live by habit will die by habit. Those who live by adaptability will outlive even their own luck. Virtù and Fortuna are more than political concepts. They are a map for navigating the chaos of life. And across 500 years of history, Machiavelli has been proven chillingly right. We cannot control everything, but we can control enough to shape our own destiny. Number 9. The beast within humanity and the gap between the world as it should be and the world as it is. At this point in The Prince, Machiavelli steps away from specific political stories and touches something deeper, something every screenwriter, psychologist, and philosopher must confront: the true nature of human beings. To him, beneath every layer of morality, every social ritual, every beautiful slogan, there exists a primal creature, hungry for power, fearful, selfish, and willing to do anything to survive. Machiavelli was not the first to recognize this darkness, but he was the first to say bluntly that the beast inside every person cannot be erased. It can only be managed. Centuries later, Freud would call it instinct. Jung would call it the shadow. But Machiavelli, back in the 15th century, advised humanity: do not deny the beast. Learn to use it. He borrowed the image of two animals to explain the art of survival. The lion, symbol of strength, authority, intimidation. The fox, symbol of cunning, subtlety, the one who sees traps before stepping into them. A leader, Machiavelli said, must be both. Goodness, without the ability to defend oneself, becomes a trap. Cruelty, without control, becomes the fire that consumes the ruler himself. The fox avoids traps. The lion scares off wolves. But Machiavelli's philosophical depth does not stop at human nature. He reveals the massive gap between the world as it should be and the world as it is. And the world as it should be, where good people are rewarded, bad people punished, and morality guides every decision. The world as it is, where schemes, betrayal, uncertainty, and greed dominate. Machiavelli warns, those who live according to the world as it should be will be crushed by the world as it is. This is one of the most brutally honest statements ever written. Not because it encourages evil, but because it forces us to confront reality. Humans are flawed, and the environment we live in is not holy. Goodness is not enough to survive. It is only enough when protected by intelligence, resilience, and the ability to see uncomfortable truths. At this point, Machiavelli is no longer the villain. He becomes the bearer of a warning. Do not be naive. Do not use illusions as your map. Understand the world as it truly is, not as you wish it to be. And only then can you survive. And this awareness becomes the foundation of Machiavelli's entire philosophy. Living among darkness does not require becoming darkness. But closing your eyes will ensure it consumes you. Number 10. The paradox of Machiavelli's life and the distorted legacy of a brilliant mind. When Machiavelli wrote The Prince, he never imagined he was creating one of the most controversial books in human history. He simply thought, I need my job back. And that is where his greatest tragedy began. Machiavelli presented the book to Lorenzo de' Medici, the man who had tortured and exiled him, in hopes of being invited back into politics. But Lorenzo didn't even bother to open it. Machiavelli, in a desperate effort to prove his worth, unintentionally created a manual that made him too dangerous to trust. He wrote about betrayal, deception, manipulation. So who would dare hire a man who understood these things perfectly? Who would place in their cabinet someone who had just authored a guidebook on overthrowing, calculating, and controlling power? His own philosophy shut the door to his return to Florence. After that failure, Machiavelli lived quietly, drifting between romantic affairs and comedies he wrote to earn money. He was no longer a diplomat, no longer a strategist, no longer the man traveling among courts to observe the fate of continents. He became a brilliant mind, pushed to the margins. Eventually, he died in silence. No office. No glory. No recognition. But the story did not end there. Decades later, when The Prince was published, it shocked Europe so deeply that an English cardinal said, "This book must have been written by the very hand of Satan." Pope Paul IV immediately banned it. Worse, Machiavelli's name became intertwined with political cruelty across Europe. In France, people blamed him, absurdly, for influencing the saint. Bartholomew's Day Massacre, even though he had been dead for years. His name became an adjective, Machiavellian, meaning cruel, deceitful, treacherous. A brilliant mind trapped forever in the role of the villain. Yet here lies the paradox. The leaders who truly understand power are the ones who read Machiavelli the most. Not to become devils, but to understand how power actually works, not how humans wish it would work. Machiavelli is dangerous because he tells the truth. And truth is always the most hated thing. The evil history assigns to him is not the evil he created, but the evil he identified and dared to name. And so Machiavelli's legacy does not lie in his harshest advice, but in the warning he wanted to give everyone who enters the arena of power. Do not confuse wishes with reality. Do not confuse morality with strength. And never, ever enter politics with your eyes closed. In the end, Machiavelli's message was not become evil, but be alert. Be strong. Be wise enough to survive in an perfect world. The wolf does not attack all the time, but it always sees danger. It does not cling to illusions. It does not deceive itself. It does not entrust its survival to someone else's kindness. And if you want to enter life as a master rather than the one being led, you must know when to be merciful and when to sharpen your claws, when to step back and when to bare your fangs. That is the strength Machiavelli wanted you to have, the strength of someone who understands the world as it is, not as they wish it to be. If what you heard today awakened something in you, if it made you see life through a stronger, clearer, more realistic lens, then like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because we have many more lessons from other great minds waiting for you. Become the wolf that observes, calculates, and prevails. And above all, never let yourself become the prey.